The house was quiet that evening, too quiet. The sound of the old clock ticking in the corner was the only thing breaking the silence. The sun had already gone down, leaving a soft orange light outside the window. Mary sat on the sofa, her hands shaking slightly as she held her phone. She had been waiting all day for her son, Daniel, to come home. He had promised to visit her after work. He never missed his visits. Every Friday, he came to have dinner with her, bringing her favorite apple pie from the small bakery near his office. But today, it was already dark, and there was no sign of him. She checked the time again. 8:45 p.m. Still no call, no message. She tried to stay calm, telling herself he was probably stuck in traffic, or maybe he had to work late. But something inside her felt wrong. It wasn't like Daniel to forget her. He was a good son, always caring, always kind. He would call even if he was running 10 minutes late. Tonight, her heart felt heavy, as if something unseen was whispering to her that something bad had happened. Mary stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The streetlights were glowing dimly, and the cold wind made the tree branches move like dark fingers against the night sky. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and sighed. Maybe I should call him, she whispered to herself. She dialed his number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. Her heart sank. She tried again. The same thing. I still remember that night, she would later tell people, her voice breaking every time those words left her lips. That was the night her whole world changed. She sat down again and stared at her phone. After a few minutes, she decided to call her daughter-in-law, Emily. Maybe Daniel was with her. Maybe he went home early. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts. When the call connected, it rang longer than usual. Then finally, Emily's soft voice came through, almost a whisper. Hello? Emily, dear, it's me, Mary. I've been waiting for Daniel. He said he would come for dinner tonight. He's not answering his phone. Is he with you? There was silence on the other end. For a few seconds, Mary could hear nothing but breathing. Then, slowly, Emily said something that made her blood run cold. He never will, Mary. Mary froze. What do you mean? She said quickly, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. What do you mean he never will? But Emily didn't answer. All Mary heard next was the sound of the phone dropping and a faint sob before the line went dead. Mary's hands were shaking so much she almost dropped the phone. She tried calling back, but Emily didn't answer. Again and again, she dialed the number, but each time it went straight to voicemail. She sat there, staring at the phone screen, not blinking, not breathing. Her mind was spinning. What did she mean, he never will? A cold feeling spread through her chest. Something was very wrong. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door. The night air was cold and sharp against her skin. She locked the door behind her and started walking toward the bus stop. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't care. She had to find out what happened. The bus ride felt endless. The streets were nearly empty, only a few people sitting quietly, lost in their own thoughts. Mary kept looking out the window, watching the streetlights pass one by one. She could feel her heart pounding as she thought of Daniel's face, his smile, his laughter, his warm hugs every Friday evening. The thought that something could have happened to him was too much to bear. When she reached Daniel's neighborhood, the streets were darker than usual. A few cars were parked outside, but his driveway was empty. That made her stomach twist. Daniel's car was always parked there. She walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Emily? It's me, Mary. Please open the door. Nothing. She pressed the doorbell, and after what felt like forever, she heard footsteps inside. The door opened slightly. Emily stood there, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Emily, what's going on? Where's Daniel? Emily's lips trembled. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. What are you talking about? Tell me what's happening. Where is he? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Please, Mary, go home. I can't talk about it. Mary pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. She could smell something faint, candles, maybe flowers. There was a strange silence in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Then she saw it, a framed photo of Daniel on the table, surrounded by white lilies and a small candle burning beside it. Her breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered. No, this can't be true. Emily broke down, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't know how to tell you. Mary stumbled forward, her knees almost giving out. She held onto the table to keep from falling. When? How? It was 2 days ago, Emily said, her voice breaking. There was an accident. On his way home from work. They said it was instant. Mary felt her entire world shatter in that moment. The room started spinning. Her ears rang, and everything around her became blurry. She fell onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. Her son, her only child, gone. But then something didn't sit right in her mind. Why didn't you tell me, she said through her tears. Why didn't anyone call me? I should have been there. Emily looked down, her hands shaking. I tried, but Daniel, he didn't want you to know. Mary's eyes widened in shock. What are you saying? Why would my son not want me to know? Emily looked up, her eyes full of fear. There were things you don't know, Mary. Things Daniel was hiding. Mary stared at her, trying to understand. What things? What are you talking about? Emily hesitated. He was in trouble. The police came here before, they asked questions about his work. He said everything was fine, but he was lying. The words hit Mary like a storm. Daniel? Her sweet, honest Daniel? In trouble? Lying to her? It didn't make sense. What kind of trouble? She demanded. Emily shook her head. I don't know. He was scared. He said someone was following him. A man. He didn't tell me much, only that if anything happened, I should stay quiet. Mary's heart pounded harder. Someone was following him? Did you tell the police? They already knew, Emily whispered. They said it was an accident, but I don't believe them. I think someone did this to him. Mary's hands went cold. She looked around the room again, noticing for the first time that the curtains were drawn tight, the windows locked, and several boxes were packed near the door. Are you leaving? She asked. Emily nodded slowly. I have to. I can't stay here. He told me to go if something ever happened. Mary stood there, frozen, staring at the woman who had just shattered her heart. The truth, or at least what seemed like the truth, was tangled in confusion and fear. Her son was gone, but now she didn't know what to believe. After a long silence, Mary walked to the small table and picked up the photo of Daniel. His smile in the picture was so full of life, so happy. If something happened to you, my boy, she whispered, I'll find out what it was. I promise. She turned to Emily. Tell me everything you know. Every detail. I need to understand. Emily looked terrified. I can't, Mary. If I tell you, they might come after us too. Who? Who will come after us? Emily didn't answer. She just stared at the floor, tears falling silently. The clock on the wall ticked louder now. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Mary felt a strange chill down her spine, as if someone was watching them. She turned slightly, her eyes moving toward the dark hallway behind Emily. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move, quick and silent. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Emily shook her head, confused. "See what?" There was someone there, Mary's voice trembled. "In the hallway." Emily turned around, but the hallway was empty. She forced a small, nervous smile. "You're just tired. Please, go home. I'll call you tomorrow." But Mary couldn't shake the feeling. As she stepped outside, she felt that same cold wind again, but this time it carried a sound, a faint whisper. She turned, looking around the quiet street, her eyes searching the shadows. Nothing. She walked slowly toward the bus stop, her heart heavy, her mind full of questions. The sound of the wind seemed to follow her. Every few steps, she thought she heard footsteps behind her, but when she turned around, there was no one there. When she finally reached home, she sat down and buried her face in her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks as memories of Daniel filled her mind, his laughter, his childhood, his kindness. But under all that grief, there was something else now, doubt. Something was wrong with the story she'd been told. The pieces didn't fit. Why didn't anyone call her? Why did Emily act so strange? Why did she say, "He never will," in that whisper full of fear? Mary wiped her tears and stood up. She looked at the photo of Daniel on her shelf, then at the phone lying beside it. She picked it up and opened his last message to her, "See you soon, Mom." Her eyes filled with tears again. "You said you'd see me soon," she whispered. "Then where are you?" The night grew quieter. The sound of the clock ticking was louder now, echoing through the empty house. And just as she was about to turn off the light and go to bed, her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. "Unknown number, don't ask questions if you want to stay safe." Mary froze. Her fingers went cold. She read the message again, her breath caught in her throat. The room suddenly felt darker, and for the first time that night, she realized this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. Mary couldn't sleep that night. The strange message kept flashing in her mind, "Don't ask questions if you want to stay safe." She read it again and again, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so hard she could almost hear it. Who sent it? How did they know she was asking questions? Only Emily knew she had been there. Was someone watching them? She got up from her bed and looked outside the window. The street was quiet, the lamps casting long shadows on the road. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The sound made her jump. She closed the curtain quickly and sat back down, pressing the phone against her chest. She thought about calling the police, but then stopped. What would she say? That she got a message from an unknown number? They would probably tell her to ignore it. But she couldn't ignore it. Not when her son's death already felt so strange. Mary turned on the small lamp beside her bed. The soft yellow light filled the room. She picked up Daniel's photo from the nightstand. His eyes looked so alive, so full of dreams. "What happened to you, my boy?" she whispered. "What were you hiding from me?" Her tears fell on the glass frame as she remembered how careful Daniel had been the last time they met. 2 weeks ago, during dinner, he kept checking his phone. He was nervous, distracted. When she asked what was wrong, he just smiled and said, "It's work stuff, Mom. Don't worry." But she saw the worry in his eyes. She remembered how he hugged her tightly when he left, longer than usual. Maybe that was his goodbye. The phone buzzed again suddenly. Mary's heart jumped. She quickly looked at the screen, but this time it was a message from her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, reminding her about the church meeting next Sunday. She sighed in relief but still felt uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching her. She turned off the light and tried to rest, but sleep didn't come. Every little sound made her sit up. The creak of the floor, the wind tapping against the window, it all felt wrong. The night felt heavier than ever. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleeping and made herself some tea. As she poured the water, she noticed something strange on her kitchen window. A small fingerprint. It was on the outside, smudged, fresh. She froze. Someone had been there. Her heart raced. She slowly walked toward the door, making sure it was locked. It was. Still, fear crawled up her spine. She sat at the table, holding her cup, her eyes never leaving the window until the first light of dawn appeared. The next morning, Mary decided to go to the police station. She needed answers. She dressed quickly and took a taxi downtown. The officer on duty, a middle-aged man named Detective Harris, listened carefully as she explained everything: Daniel's sudden death, Emily's strange behavior, the message. Harris wrote down notes and asked calmly, "Did you keep the message, ma'am?" "Yes," she said, handing over her phone. He read it and nodded slowly. "We've had similar cases recently. People receiving strange warnings after an accident or death. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes it's not." "What do you mean?" Mary asked, leaning forward. Harris sighed. "Your son's accident was handled by another team. From what I can see in the system, it was reported as a highway crash. But there's something odd. There's no witness report. No CCTV footage. Just the car and your son's ID." Mary frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Daniel was careful. He never sped. Are you sure it was an accident?" The detective looked thoughtful. "I'll need to check. But if someone's trying to scare you, it means they don't want you asking questions. Which tells me, maybe you should." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Please, find out the truth. I can't live not knowing." He nodded. "I'll do what I can. But be careful, Mrs. Walker. If you get another message, don't reply. And if anything feels off, call me immediately." She thanked him and left, feeling a mix of hope and fear. As she stepped outside the station, she noticed a black car parked across the street. Its windows were tinted dark. She thought she saw someone inside, watching her. But when she looked again, the car started and drove away slowly. Her stomach twisted. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Or maybe not. That afternoon, she decided to visit Daniel's workplace. He had been an engineer at a construction company called Bright Line Developments. The building was large, full of glass and steel, standing tall against the sky. The receptionist smiled politely when Mary asked about Daniel. "Oh, Daniel Walker," she said. "Yes, he was one of our best. Everyone loved him here. Such a tragedy. Can I speak to someone who worked closely with him?" Mary asked. The receptionist hesitated. "I'm not sure if anyone is available right now." Mary pressed gently. "Please. It's important." After a few minutes, a man in his 40s came out. His name was Peter. He looked serious, his eyes tired. "Mrs. Walker," he said, shaking her hand. "Daniel spoke about you often. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," she said softly. "Peter, I just want to understand what happened. Did Daniel seem worried before he died?" Peter looked around as if checking if anyone was listening. "Yes," he said quietly. "He was nervous these last few weeks. Kept saying someone was watching him. He thought his phone was tapped. I told him to report it, but he said he couldn't." "Why not?" Mary asked. Peter looked uneasy. "He said it was about a project." Something he discovered. He mentioned documents, files he wasn't supposed to see. Mary's heart raced. Do you know where those files are? He shook his head. No. But 2 days before his accident, he left work early. Said he had to fix something before it's too late. That was the last time I saw him. Mary thanked him and left, her mind spinning again. Documents. A secret project. Someone following him. It all pointed to something much bigger than an accident. She returned home, exhausted, and sat on the couch. The afternoon light fell through the window, making long golden lines on the floor. She looked at Daniel's picture again. What did you get yourself into, my son? She whispered. As she sat there thinking, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a call. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she pressed the green button. Hello? There was silence. She could hear faint breathing on the other side. Who is this? She asked. No answer. Then, after a pause, a low voice said, Stop digging, Mrs. Walker. He's gone. Let it go. Mary's breath caught in her throat. Who are you? What do you know about my son? But the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her heart racing. She called Detective Harris immediately and told him everything. He promised to trace the number and check the source, but he warned her again, please, be careful. These people don't play fair. That night, she locked every door and window before going to bed. But just as she was about to turn off the light, she heard a soft sound outside, like footsteps. Slow, steady, close. She froze, holding her breath. The sound moved from the front door to the window. She tiptoed toward the curtain and slowly lifted one corner. The street outside was empty. But then she saw it, something white on her doorstep. She waited a few minutes before opening the door. Lying there was a small envelope, no name, no address. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a photo. Daniel, standing next to his car, smiling. But in the background of the photo, half hidden behind a tree, was a man in a black coat, his face blurred. And on the back of the photo, in red ink, were the words, he tried to tell the truth. Mary's breath came in short gasps. She sat on the floor, the photo slipping from her hands. Someone had been watching Daniel. And now, they were watching her. She picked up the photo again and looked closer. The place where it was taken seemed familiar. The old road near the river, the one Daniel always took when he came to visit. Maybe she could find something there. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, Mary packed a small bag and drove to the river road. The sky was gray, and the air smelled of rain. She parked near the bridge and walked slowly, looking around. There were still marks on the road, black lines from where the accident happened. A broken fence. A few pieces of glass still glimmered in the dirt. She stood there for a while, imagining her son's last moments. Tears filled her eyes. I'm here, Daniel, she whispered. Show me what you wanted me to see. Then, as she looked closer at the fence, something caught her eye. A piece of metal, small and shiny, half buried in the grass. She bent down and picked it up. It wasn't from Daniel's car. It looked like part of another vehicle, dark paint, maybe from a truck or a van. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it mean there was another vehicle involved? Maybe a hit and run? Before she could think more, she heard the sound of an engine. A car was coming slowly down the road. She turned around, expecting to see a passerby, but the car stopped a few meters away. It was the same black car she had seen outside the police station. Her pulse quickened. The driver's window rolled down slightly. She couldn't see the person inside, just a shadow. Then a man's voice said softly, "You shouldn't be here." Mary took a step back, clutching the metal piece in her hand. "Who are you?" she demanded. The car engine roared, and before she could say another word, it sped off down the road, disappearing around the bend. She stood there, trembling, her heart pounding. It was clear now, someone didn't want her finding the truth. But instead of scaring her, it made her stronger. She looked at the piece of metal in her hand and whispered, "You can try to stop me. But I'm not done." The wind picked up, blowing her hair across her face. Behind her, the river moved slowly, silent and endless. And somewhere deep in her heart, she felt Daniel's voice, faint but clear, as if he was whispering through the wind, "Find the truth, Mom." Mary took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and turned toward her car. She didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain, she wouldn't stop until she knew who killed her son. The drive back from the river felt longer than usual. The gray sky hung low, and the wind whispered through the trees like a voice trying to tell her something. Mary's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her mind was still replaying the moment that black car stopped near her. The voice of that man, cold, calm, and warning, echoed in her ears, "You shouldn't be here." She looked in the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting the car to follow her again. But the road behind her was empty. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was as if every shadow on the roadside was alive, hiding someone unseen. By the time she reached her street, the sun had begun to set. The sky turned a dark orange, fading into gray. She parked her car in front of her small house and sat for a few moments, trying to calm her breathing. The metal piece she found near the river was still in her bag. It felt heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. As she stepped out of the car, a strange silence surrounded her house. Normally, she could hear the laughter of the neighborhood children or the bark of Mr. Jenkins's dog next door. But now, there was nothing. Just stillness. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. She unlocked the front door and pushed it open slowly. The air inside felt different, thick, heavy, and cold. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. Everything looked normal at first glance. The curtains were closed, the table was neat, and the faint smell of her lavender candle lingered. But something was off. She set her bag down and looked around carefully. Her heart began to race when she noticed the small things, a chair slightly out of place, a photo frame turned upside down, and the faint sound of something dripping from the kitchen. She walked toward it slowly. The tap was open, water falling one drop at a time into the sink. She knew she hadn't left it like that. Her fingers trembled as she turned it off. Then, as she stood there, she saw something on the counter, a small black keychain. Her heart stopped. She knew that keychain. It had a small silver tag with the letter D engraved on it. It belonged to Daniel. She picked it up slowly, staring at it as if her eyes might be lying to her. She had seen it many times before, hanging from his car keys. But the police had told her that everything from the car had been destroyed in the crash. How could this be here? Her knees went weak. She sat down, holding the keychain close to her chest. Someone had been in her house. And whoever it was, they had left this here on purpose. Her phone rang suddenly, making her jump. She looked at the screen. It was Detective Harris. "Mrs. Walker," his voice came through, calm but serious. "I've been reviewing your son's case files. I think we need to meet." "Detective," she said, her voice shaking, "someone broke into my house." "What? Are you safe?" "Yes, but they left something. Something that belonged to Daniel." "Don't touch anything else," he said firmly. "I'm sending an officer over right now. Lock your doors and wait inside." Mary agreed and hung up. She locked the front door and sat on the couch, staring at the keychain on the table. Every second felt longer. She could hear her heart beating, the clock ticking, and faintly, outside the window, the sound of a car passing slowly down the street. After 20 minutes, there was a knock at the door. "Mrs. Walker?" "It's Officer Ray." She looked through the peephole and saw a young officer in uniform. She opened the door slowly. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. "Detective Harris sent me. Are you all right?" "I think so," she said softly. "It was here when I came home." She pointed to the keychain. He put on gloves and picked it up carefully. "We'll have it tested for prints," he said. "But it's strange that someone would leave this here." "I think they're trying to scare me," Mary whispered. "Or warn me." Officer Ray nodded. "Maybe. But don't worry. You're not alone." He stayed for a few more minutes, checking the doors and windows. Before he left, he told her to call immediately if she noticed anything unusual again. When the door closed behind him, Mary sat in silence. The shadows outside had grown darker. She could hear the wind brushing against the windows, making a soft, ghostly sound. She turned on the lamp beside her, needing light, needing to see something real. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message. She hesitated before opening it. "Unknown number, he left something for you. Find it before they do." Mary's hands shook as she read the words. She stared at them for a long time, her heart thudding in her chest. Find it before they do. Find what? She remembered what Peter from Daniel's office had said about files, documents Daniel wasn't supposed to see. Could that be what the message meant? She stood up and went to her son's old room. She hadn't entered it since he died. It was just how he'd left it, books on the shelf, clothes folded neatly, a small model airplane on the desk. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, and for a moment, she felt like he was still there. She sat down at his desk and opened the drawers one by one. Pens, papers, receipts, but nothing unusual. Then she noticed the bottom drawer was locked. She searched his things until she found an old key taped under the drawer handle. It fit perfectly. When she opened it, she found a small brown envelope. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out. Inside were a few photographs and a USB drive. The photos were of construction sites, large buildings under construction, workers in helmets, trucks loaded with materials. But in every photo, there was something odd, a small red logo on the trucks that wasn't part of Daniel's company. It looked like a circle with a slash through it. She turned the USB drive over in her hand. It was labeled "For Mom." Tears filled her eyes. "For Mom," she whispered. Her heart broke all over again. She plugged the USB into her old laptop. At first, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared titled Project Zenith. Inside were dozens of documents and one video file named truth.mp4. She clicked it. The screen flickered, and Daniel's face appeared. He looked tired, his eyes red, his voice shaky. "Mom, if you're watching this, it means something happened to me," he said. "Please don't be scared. I didn't want to drag you into this, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." Mary's hands covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "I found something wrong at work," Daniel continued. "The company's been using fake permits. They're building on unsafe land that's been marked for contamination. I reported it, but someone erased my emails. Then I started getting followed. If they find this, they'll know I talked." The screen glitched for a moment, and Daniel's voice lowered. "If anything happens to me, show this to the police. The files are all here. Trust no one, Mom, not even Emily. She knows more than she says." The video ended. Mary sat frozen. Her son had uncovered something dangerous, something that cost him his life. And Emily. Emily knew? She grabbed her phone and called Detective Harris immediately, but before she could speak, there was a loud sound outside. A thud. Like someone closing a car door. She moved slowly toward the window and peeked through the curtain. A dark van was parked across the street. Two men stood beside it, wearing black jackets, looking straight at her house. Her heart raced. She quickly unplugged the USB drive and hid it inside a small box under her bed. Then she turned off the lights and waited quietly. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps outside. They stopped right at her front door. Her breathing became shallow. Then came the sound of a soft knock. Not loud. Just slow, deliberate knocks. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. Mary didn't move. She didn't even breathe. The knocking stopped. Then silence. For a full minute, nothing happened. Then, faintly, she heard a whisper through the door. "Mrs. Walker, we know you have it." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her face. After a moment, the sound of footsteps faded. The van's engine started, and the vehicle drove away. Mary waited for several minutes before daring to move. Her hands shook as she called the detective again. This time, she could barely speak. "They came, they were outside my house." "I'm sending someone right now," Harris said firmly. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." She hung up, still trembling. Her house, once her safe place, now felt like a cage. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the ticking clock echoed like a warning. She walked to her son's room again, stood in front of his photo, and whispered, "I'll protect what you left, Daniel. I'll make sure the world knows what they did." Just then, she heard a faint ding from her laptop. She turned around. The screen had turned on by itself. The video of Daniel started playing again, but this time, the ending was different. After his last words, another short clip appeared. Daniel looked directly at the camera, his voice urgent. "If anyone's watching this who isn't my mother," he said, "you're already too late." Then the screen went black. Mary stood there in shock, her heart racing faster than ever. Outside, the wind howled, and a car's headlights flashed briefly through her window. Someone was back. The sound of tires on the gravel outside broke the silence that had wrapped around Mary's house. Flashing blue and red lights filled the windows. She ran to the door and opened it quickly. Detective Harris stepped out of the police car, followed by Officer Ray. His face was serious, his coat blowing slightly in the cold wind. "Mrs. Walker, are you all right?" he asked as he entered the house, scanning the dark room carefully. I don't know," Mary said, her voice trembling. "They were here. 2 men. They knocked on my door. They said they knew I had it." "Had what?" Harris asked, looking at her sharply. "The USB. The one Daniel left for me." The detective's eyes widened slightly. "Where is it now?" "I hid it," she whispered. "Under my bed." Harris nodded and motioned for Officer Ray to check the house. The young officer went into her bedroom. A moment later, he came back, his face pale. "Sir, it's not there." Mary froze. "What?" "I searched everywhere," Ray said. "The box under the bed, it's open. It's empty." Mary felt her knees weaken. No, I put it there myself. I swear, it was there." Harris's expression hardened. "They must have come in before we arrived." Mary covered her mouth, her heart pounding. "But I didn't hear them." "I didn't." "They're professionals," Harris said quietly. "People like this don't make noise. They know what they're doing." He looked around the room again, his eyes scanning the windows, the ceiling corners. "Do you hear that faint buzz?" he asked suddenly. Mary frowned. "Buzz?" He took a few steps toward the living room lamp, then reached behind it. A small black device was stuck to the back of the lampshade, barely visible. He held it up. They've been listening, he said grimly. Mary's eyes widened. Listening? You mean? Yes, Harris said. Your house is bugged. They've probably been hearing everything you've said since you came back. Mary felt her stomach twist. The thought that strangers had been listening to her, watching her, it made her skin crawl. Officer Ray began searching the rest of the house. Within minutes, he found 2 more tiny devices, one behind the clock on the wall, another under the kitchen table. Harris put them all in a small evidence bag. These aren't normal bugs, he said. They're advanced. Whoever planted these knows how to cover their tracks. Mary sat on the sofa, holding her head in her hands. They took the USB, didn't they? Everything Daniel left for me, it's gone. Maybe not everything, Harris said, sitting across from her. You said your son recorded a video, right? The one labeled truth.mp4? Yes, she said softly. It was on the USB. I saw it once before it disappeared. Good, he said. That means you remember it. Everything he said, every word. That could still help us. Mary nodded, trying to stay calm. He said the company he worked for was doing something illegal. Using fake permits. Building on dangerous land. Harris took notes quickly. That company, Brightline Developments, you said he worked there, right? Yes. I'll have someone look into it. But Mrs. Walker, he said, lowering his voice, if what your son said is true, these people are powerful. They won't stop until they erase all evidence. You can't stay here anymore. Mary looked up, frightened. What do you mean? You need to come with us tonight. We'll put you in a safe place until we find out who's behind this. She hesitated. But this is my home. All my memories are here. I know, Harris said gently. But right now, your safety matters more than memories. After a moment of silence, she nodded. Okay. Harris helped her pack a small bag. Officer Ray stayed near the door, keeping watch. But just as they were about to leave, they heard something, a faint sound outside. A car engine. Slowly idling. Harris motioned for them to stay quiet. He peered through the curtain. A black van was parked a few houses down, its lights off. It's them, Mary whispered, her voice trembling. Harris nodded slightly. Ray, take Mrs. Walker through the back. Now. Ray guided her toward the kitchen door. The cold air hit them as they stepped outside. The backyard was dark except for the pale moonlight. They moved quickly toward the fence. Harris stayed behind for a moment, keeping his gun ready. Then suddenly, glass shattered. A window from the living room broke. Harris turned, shouting, "Go!" Mary and Ray climbed over the fence, running through the alley behind the house. Her heart pounded as she heard voices from the front yard, men shouting, boots hitting the ground. They reached the end of the alley and ran toward the street. A police car waited there, lights flashing. Ray opened the back door and helped Mary inside. Within seconds, Harris appeared, running toward them. He jumped in the front seat and shouted, "Drive!" The car sped away. Through the window, Mary looked back at her house. She saw 2 dark figures standing by the broken window, watching them leave. The home she had lived in for 30 years was no longer hers, it was a place of danger now. They drove for nearly an hour before stopping at a small motel on the edge of town. Harris parked the car and turned to her. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning, we'll move you somewhere safer." Mary nodded weakly. She was exhausted, her eyes heavy, her heart broken. She thanked the officers as they left her a contact number and went back to their car to stand guard outside. She entered the small motel room and sat on the edge of the bed. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. Everything felt unreal. In less than a week, she had gone from being a mother mourning her son to a woman hunted for knowing too much. Her eyes drifted to the small nightstand beside the bed. There was a Bible there. She opened it randomly, hoping to find peace. The page read, "And the truth shall set you free." Tears filled her eyes again. "Then let the truth come out, Daniel," she whispered. "No matter what it costs." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. She hesitated before picking it up. It was a message from Emily. "Emily, Mary, please. Don't talk to the police anymore. You're in danger." Mary stared at the screen. Emily. The same woman who had said, "He never will." The same woman Daniel had warned her not to trust. She typed quickly, "Emily, what's happening? What do you know?" For several minutes, there was no reply. Then her phone rang. "Mary," Emily's voice came through, trembling, "they're watching me too. Please, listen to me carefully. Daniel gave you something, didn't he? Something important." "Yes," Mary said. "He left me a USB. But they took it." Emily gasped. "Oh no, oh God. That means they know." "Know what?" Mary asked desperately. "Tell me, Emily. What did Daniel find?" Emily hesitated. "He found files that proved Brightline was being used as a cover company. They were hiding money for another organization, something called the Circle. He told me if anything happened, I should destroy everything. But I couldn't." Mary's heart raced. "The Circle? What is that?" "I don't know exactly," Emily said, crying now. "But Daniel said they control people, even the police. He was scared. He said if you ever started asking questions, they'd come for you too." Mary felt a chill run down her spine. "Emily, where are you now?" "I can't say," Emily whispered. "They're everywhere. But listen. Daniel didn't trust technology. He always made a backup. If they took one copy, there's another. He said he'd keep it somewhere safe, somewhere personal." "Where?" Emily hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe something from his childhood? Somewhere that meant something to him." The call ended suddenly. Static. Silence. Mary tried calling back, but the line was dead. She sat there, thinking hard. Somewhere personal. Somewhere from his childhood. Her mind drifted to the old cabin by the lake, the one Daniel's father had built before he passed away. Daniel used to go there every summer. He called it his secret place. Her heart began to race. That had to be it. She grabbed her coat and opened the door. Harris was still outside, talking on his radio. "Detective," she said, "I know where the backup might be." "Where?" "The old cabin by the lake. My husband built it years ago. Daniel loved that place." Harris nodded. "All right. But we go together. It's not safe for you to go alone." They left immediately, driving through the dark countryside. The moon followed them above the trees, pale and distant. The lake was nearly an hour away. The road was quiet, surrounded by forest. As they approached, the old cabin came into view, a small wooden structure by the water, half hidden by trees. The roof looked worn, and the porch creaked as they stepped on it. Mary's hands shook as she unlocked the door. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air. It was cold inside, but she could still feel Daniel's presence. His old drawings were pinned on the wall. A fishing rod leaned in the corner. Harris turned on his flashlight. "Let's start searching. He might have hidden something under the floorboards or in the walls." They began checking each corner carefully. Mary went to the old desk where Daniel used to write as a boy. The drawers were empty, except for one. It was stuck. She pulled harder until it opened, and inside was a small tin box. Her heart leapt. This must be it. Harris came closer. Open it carefully. She opened the lid slowly. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small memory card. The paper had Daniel's handwriting on it. If you found this, it means I was right. Don't let them silence the truth. The circle is closer than you think. Mary handed the card to Harris, who immediately put it in a small plastic bag. We'll check what's on this, he said. It could be everything we need. Just then, they heard a sound outside. Footsteps on the leaves. Harris signaled her to stay quiet. He moved toward the window and looked out. Two figures were standing near the trees, flashlights moving slowly. They found us, he whispered. Mary's heart stopped. The detective grabbed his gun and whispered, "Stay behind me." The front door creaked suddenly, and a voice called out from the darkness, deep, cold, and familiar. Mrs. Walker, the voice said softly, "You should have stayed home." Mary froze. She knew that voice. She had heard it before. It was the same man from the river. The night air was cold and heavy, the kind that made every sound seem sharper, every shadow darker. The two figures outside the cabin moved closer, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like thin blades. Inside, Mary stood frozen, clutching the edge of the table where the tin box had been. Detective Harris raised a hand silently, signaling her to stay still. The floorboards creaked softly beneath his boots as he moved toward the window again. He could see the outlines of the men now, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter, moving cautiously, their voices low but firm. Mary's breath came out in quick, shallow gasps. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves outside felt like whispers warning her to run. The cabin that had once been her family's safe place now felt like a trap. She glanced toward the back door, half hidden behind a curtain. Her eyes met Harris's, and he gave a quick nod. They both knew they had to leave, now. Suddenly, the front door handle turned. The wooden frame rattled as someone pushed it from the outside. Mrs. Walker, the voice came again, deep and mocking. We don't want to hurt you. We just want what's ours. Harris raised his gun and took a quiet step forward. Stay behind me, he whispered to Mary. The handle shook again, harder this time. The old lock groaned under the pressure. Harris motioned for Mary to move toward the back, and she obeyed, her steps light but trembling. Just as she reached the kitchen, the front door burst open with a loud crash. The two men entered, their flashlights blinding in the dark room. Go! Harris shouted, firing once toward the doorway. The shot echoed through the cabin, followed by the sound of splintering wood and a cry of surprise. Mary pushed open the back door and stumbled into the cold night air, her breath visible in the mist. The forest behind the cabin stretched endlessly, the trees tall and silent like sentinels watching from the dark. The ground was uneven, covered in dead leaves that crunched under her feet. Harris followed closely, his flashlight off, guiding her by memory and moonlight. They moved quickly but quietly, trying not to draw attention. Behind them, voices shouted orders. They went this way, one of the men yelled. The sound of boots on the ground grew louder. Mary's heart pounded in her ears. Every step felt like it could give them away. The branches scratched against her coat, and the cold wind burned her face. Harris whispered, "Keep moving. Don't stop. There's an old trail up ahead that leads to the main road." They ran for what felt like forever until Mary's legs began to ache. She stumbled over a root and almost fell, but Harris caught her arm and pulled her back up. "We're almost there," he said, breathing hard. Then, suddenly, they heard another sound, a car engine starting somewhere nearby. Headlights flickered through the trees. The men had a vehicle waiting. Harris cursed under his breath. "They're trying to cut us off." He led Mary toward a small slope. Down there, he said, pointing. There's a stream. Follow it. The sound of the water will cover our tracks. They slid down the slope, landing beside the stream. The water was shallow but icy cold, the moonlight reflecting off its surface. They began wading through it, the current pulling gently at their legs. The sound of rushing water drowned out their footsteps. After a few minutes, Harris stopped. "We'll rest here for a second," he said quietly. "You okay?" Mary nodded weakly. "I'm fine, just scared." He looked at her, his face softening. "I know. But you're doing good. We'll get through this." She wanted to believe him. But as she looked around at the endless forest, a terrible thought came to her: what if they never made it out? What if Daniel's death wasn't just about his company but something much bigger? Before she could speak, Harris's phone buzzed. He looked at it quickly, frowning. "It's the station," he said. He stepped a few feet away to answer. Mary sat down on a rock, rubbing her cold hands together. Her thoughts drifted back to the tin box and the memory card inside. The words on Daniel's note echoed in her mind: "The circle is closer than you think." She glanced over at Harris, who was still talking quietly. But something about his body language changed. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. He turned slightly away from her, lowering his voice. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but his tone was tense. Her heartbeat quickened. She tried to listen closer. He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket. "What did they say?" she asked softly. He looked at her for a moment before answering. "They said backup is coming. We just have to hold out until morning." But something about the way he said it felt off, too calm, too practiced. "Detective," she said slowly, "how did they find us at the cabin so fast?" He hesitated, then said, "They probably tracked the car. Or maybe Emily told someone without realizing." Mary frowned. Emily wouldn't do that. Harris didn't respond. He just stared at the water, his face unreadable. They continued walking along the stream, but the silence between them grew heavier. The forest seemed to close in tighter. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing. Harris stopped and said, "We'll rest here until sunrise." Mary sat on the ground, leaning against a tree. The cold seeped into her bones. "Do you really think this circle killed my son?" she asked quietly. Harris sat across from her, his face half lit by the moon. "I think your son found something they didn't want anyone to know. And now they're cleaning up." She nodded slowly. "Then we have to make sure his story gets out." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly what we'll do." She wanted to believe him again. But deep down, a strange unease kept gnawing at her. Something about his calmness, even after being chased and shot at, it didn't feel right. Eventually, exhaustion took over. Mary's eyes grew heavy, and she drifted into a restless sleep. When she woke up, dawn was breaking. The sunlight peeked through the trees, soft and pale. Harris was gone. Her heart jumped. She stood up quickly, looking around. His coat was still on the ground, but his gun and phone were missing. "Harris?" she called softly. No answer. She took a few steps toward the trees and froze when she saw footprints leading away from the clearing, 2 sets of them. Harris hadn't gone alone. Someone else had been here. She followed the prints slowly until she heard voices ahead. Hiding behind a tree, she listened. "Yes, I have it," Harris was saying. His voice was calm, but cold now. "The card's with me. She doesn't know yet." Mary's stomach turned. Her hands started shaking. Another voice replied, low and unfamiliar. "Good. Bring it to the drop point. The circle will handle the rest." She felt like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Harris, the man she thought was helping her, was one of them. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, trying not to make a sound. But a dry twig snapped under her shoe. Harris turned instantly. Mary? She didn't wait. She ran. Branches tore at her coat, the cold air burning her lungs. Behind her, she could hear him shouting her name, his footsteps pounding on the ground. Mary! Stop! You don't understand. But she didn't stop. She didn't want to hear another lie. She kept running until she saw sunlight glinting through the trees. A road. She stumbled toward it, gasping for air. A small gas station stood at the end of the road, and she ran straight toward it. The man behind the counter looked up in shock as she burst through the door. Please, she panted. Call the police. Now. He reached for the phone, but before he could dial, a black SUV pulled up outside. Mary turned to look and saw Harris step out. His face was calm, his hands raised slightly, as if he didn't want to scare her. Mary, he said, walking slowly toward her. Listen to me. I had no choice. She backed away. You lied to me. You're one of them. No, he said, shaking his head. Not one of them. I was working undercover. The only way to get close to them was to pretend I was part of it. You have to trust me. Mary's heart raced. How can I trust you now? Before he could answer, another SUV appeared from the opposite side of the road, this one marked with real police lights. 3 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. Detective Harris, one of them shouted. Drop your weapon. Harris froze. What the? The officer continued, You're under arrest for obstruction and unauthorized possession of evidence. Mary stood there, stunned. The officers cuffed Harris as he protested, You don't understand. I'm on your side. One of the officers, a woman, approached Mary gently. Ma'am, are you Mrs. Walker? Yes, she said, still in shock. Please come with us. You're safe now. As they guided her toward the police car, she looked back at Harris. His eyes met hers, filled with something between guilt and desperation. As the car pulled away, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. The men who had chased her were still out there. The circle wasn't finished. And the memory card, she realized suddenly, it wasn't with her anymore. Harris had it when they were at the cabin. Her pulse quickened. He had said the words, the card's with me. That meant. She looked out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. The truth was still out there, but now it was hidden again. And worse, she didn't know who to trust anymore. The forest faded behind her as the car drove on, but one thought stayed in her mind, what if Harris wasn't lying? What if he really was trying to protect her? And if that was true, then who were the officers who just arrested him? The car drove through the empty countryside road, the trees sliding past like dark shadows against the rising sun. Mary sat in the back seat, her hands trembling slightly as she stared out the window. The woman officer who had spoken to her earlier was sitting beside the driver, her face calm but unreadable. Another officer, a tall man with a square jaw, was driving. Neither of them had spoken much since they left the gas station. Mary tried to slow her breathing, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. Everything that had just happened felt unreal, the chase, the arrest, the lies. The image of Harris being handcuffed replayed in her mind again and again. He had looked right at her, shouting that he was trying to help. She wanted to believe him, but her mind was too clouded with fear and confusion. She finally broke the silence. Where are you taking me? She asked softly. The woman officer turned slightly in her seat and smiled faintly. To the station in Fairview. It's about 40 minutes from here. You'll be safe there, Mrs. Walker. Safe, Mary repeated, almost whispering. The word felt empty. The driver spoke without looking back. Don't worry, ma'am. We've been assigned to protect you. Detective Harris will be dealt with properly. Mary hesitated. He said he was undercover. That he wasn't really part of them. The woman officer's expression didn't change. They all say that when they get caught. Mary nodded slowly, but something inside her didn't settle. The way they spoke felt too rehearsed, too cold. The woman's tone wasn't comforting, it was calculated. She looked at the back of the driver's seat. A small silver badge glinted on his uniform, catching a ray of sunlight. At first, it looked normal. But then she noticed something strange, a faint engraved symbol on the corner of the badge. A circle. Her stomach dropped. She blinked, thinking maybe it was just her imagination. But when the light hit it again, she saw it clearly this time, a small, engraved ring with a line cutting through the center. The same design she had seen faintly printed on Daniel's note from the tin box. Her throat went dry. She leaned slightly toward the window to get a better look. The woman officer glanced at her in the mirror. Everything all right, Mrs. Walker? Mary quickly forced a small smile. Yes, just tired. The officer nodded, turning her gaze forward again. Mary sat back slowly, her mind spinning. These officers weren't really from the station. They couldn't be. The circle had found her again, and she was sitting right in their car. She needed to think fast. Her phone was gone, they had taken it when she got in the car. The doors were locked, and the windows were tinted. Running wasn't an option yet. She looked out the window, watching the road signs fly past. Fairview was still 30 miles away. Then, as the car slowed down for a turn, something caught her eye. A small diner stood by the roadside, a single-story building with a flickering neon sign that read Betty's Cafe. Several cars were parked outside, and people were going in for breakfast. Her heart started to beat faster. That was her chance. Excuse me, she said quickly. Could we stop here, please? I haven't eaten anything since last night. I feel dizzy. The driver glanced at the woman officer. They exchanged a look. The woman hesitated, then sighed. Fine. 5 minutes. Stay close to us. The car pulled into the small parking lot, the tires crunching over gravel. As they got out, the smell of coffee and bacon drifted through the air. Inside, the diner was warm and bright. Country music played softly from a radio near the counter. A few truck drivers sat drinking coffee, their laughter filling the space. Mary followed the two officers to a corner booth. They sat down, and she forced herself to smile. I'll just use the restroom, she said, pointing toward the hallway at the back. The woman officer nodded. Don't take too long. Mary walked calmly toward the hallway, her heart hammering. As soon as she turned the corner, she didn't go into the restroom. Instead, she ducked into the kitchen entrance, pretending to look confused. A waitress turned, surprised. Ma'am, can I help you? Mary lowered her voice quickly. Please, listen to me. I'm in danger. Those 2 people I came in with, they're not real police. You have to call 911. Right now. The waitress's eyes widened. Are you serious? Yes. Please. They'll kill me if they find out I said anything. The waitress nodded shakily and turned toward the phone by the counter. But just as she reached for it, the kitchen door swung open. The woman officer stood there, her hand on her belt, smiling coldly. There you are, Mrs. Walker, she said. We were worried you got lost. Mary froze. The waitress looked between them nervously. Everything okay? The waitress asked, her voice uncertain. The officer's smile didn't fade. Everything's fine. Just a misunderstanding. Mary's stomach turned. The woman's eyes were sharp, her tone smooth, too smooth. Come along now, she said, touching Mary's arm. Mary tried to pull back. I just needed a moment. The officer's grip tightened. Of course. You can rest in the car. The waitress took a step back, clearly sensing something was wrong. Maybe I should. Before she could finish, the officer flashed her badge. Police business. Please stay out of it. She led Mary back toward the door. As they passed the dining area, the driver looked up from his seat and nodded slightly. Everything inside Mary screamed to run, but the officer's grip on her arm was firm. When they reached the car, the officer opened the back door. Get in, Mrs. Walker. Mary hesitated, staring at the dark interior. Please, she whispered, I just need to call my family. The officer leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes cold. You don't have a family anymore, Mary. You should have stayed quiet like your son. Mary's heart stopped. She stepped back instinctively, but before the officer could react, a loud voice came from behind them. Hey! Is everything all right here? It was a man from the diner, a tall man with a trucker's jacket. He had followed them out, concern written across his face. The officer straightened quickly, forcing a polite smile. Everything's fine, sir. Just police business. The man looked doubtful. She doesn't look fine. Mary saw her chance. Please, she shouted suddenly. Help me. They're not real police. The driver reached for her, but the man stepped between them. Back off, he said, his voice firm. The officer's smile vanished. Sir, you need to leave right now. But before anyone could move, another car pulled into the lot, a silver sedan with flashing blue lights. Real police officers stepped out. The woman officer cursed under her breath. Damn it. Within seconds, the real officers surrounded them. Hands where we can see them, one shouted. The fake driver and the woman officer looked at each other, realizing they were caught. The woman grabbed Mary suddenly, pulling her close. You think you're safe now? She hissed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Then she shoved Mary hard toward the ground and ran. Shots rang out. The woman officer fell near the edge of the parking lot, her weapon clattering across the gravel. The driver was tackled and handcuffed moments later. Mary sat frozen on the ground, shaking. The truck driver who had stepped in came over quickly, helping her up. You okay, ma'am? She nodded weakly, tears filling her eyes. Thank you, you saved my life. The lead officer approached her. Mrs. Walker, you're safe now. We've been tracking these imposters for weeks. You're lucky someone recognized the badge symbols, they belong to a secret organization we've been investigating. The Circle, Mary whispered. The officer looked at her sharply. How do you know that name? Mary hesitated. My son, he died because of them. The officer's expression softened. Then you're part of something much bigger than we thought. They escorted her to one of the police cars and gave her water. The truck driver waved before leaving, and Mary thanked him again. As they began driving away, the officer beside her said, We'll take you to a federal safe house this time. Not just a local station. You'll be guarded until we figure out who inside the system has been compromised. Mary nodded, still shaking. Please. I just want to finish what my son started. The officer looked at her thoughtfully. Then we'll need that memory card. Mary froze. How do you know about that? She asked quietly. The officer smiled slightly, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Because Harris told me before he disappeared. Her heart stopped. Disappeared? Yes, he said calmly. Right after you were taken from the gas station, the transport van carrying him was attacked. He's gone. No trace. Mary felt the air leave her lungs. Gone? The officer nodded. We don't know if he's alive or not. She looked out the window, her hands trembling again. The forest passed by outside, endless and silent. If Harris was gone, then maybe he had been telling the truth all along. Maybe he really had been trying to protect her. Her thoughts raced back to his last words before being taken away, "The truth is closer than you think." She turned to the officer beside her. "You said you're taking me to a safe house, right?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. A private one. Only a few people know its location." She looked at his badge. It was clean, shiny, no strange symbols. But as the sunlight shifted through the window, she noticed something reflected in the rearview mirror. A pendant hanging from the dashboard mirror, a small silver ring with a line through it. Her blood ran cold. She leaned forward slightly, her voice shaking. What is that symbol?" The officer smiled faintly without turning. "A family emblem," he said. "You'll understand soon enough." Mary pressed back into her seat, her breath coming faster. The car turned off the main road, heading into a forest path. The trees closed in around them. The word echoed in her mind again and again, circle. She realized with horror that she wasn't being taken to safety. She was being delivered. The car rolled deeper into the forest, its tires crunching softly over fallen leaves and gravel. The sunlight struggled to break through the thick branches above, painting the world in a dull, greenish gloom. Mary sat in the back seat, her fingers clenched tightly around the strap of her bag. Every sound, the rumble of the engine, the rustling of trees, made her pulse quicken. She tried to calm herself by looking outside, but the deeper they went, the more silent and lifeless everything became. No houses. No people. Just endless trees. The air felt colder here, heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Finally, the car turned onto a narrow dirt road. After a few minutes, they reached a large wooden gate with tall metal fencing on both sides. The officer in the passenger seat got out and typed something into a keypad. The gate slowly opened with a mechanical hum. Mary's heart sank. Whatever was behind that gate, she knew it wasn't a safe house. They drove in. The gate closed automatically behind them. Ahead stood a large two-story cabin, built from dark wood, with no visible neighbors for miles. It looked like an ordinary forest house, but something about it felt wrong. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and faint security cameras blinked red at every corner. The car stopped in front of the porch. The driver turned around and smiled politely. "We're here, Mrs. Walker. Please, come inside." Mary hesitated. "Where exactly is here?" The officer beside her gave a small shrug. "Somewhere safe." That answer sent a shiver down her spine. She stepped out slowly. The air was cold, and the wind carried the faint smell of damp earth and pine. The officer led her toward the cabin's front door. As soon as they entered, the door locked automatically behind them with a heavy click. Inside, the place was eerily quiet. There were no personal items, no family pictures, no warmth. Just bare furniture, gray walls, and a long hallway leading to several closed doors. Mary looked around carefully. "Who owns this place?" The officer smiled. "A friend of your son's." Her heart skipped a beat. "My son?" "Yes," he said calmly. "You'll see soon." Before she could ask anything more, the other officer, the one who had been driving, handed her a cup of tea. "You must be tired. Drink this, it'll help." Mary took the cup with shaking hands. The steam rose gently, carrying a faint smell of herbs. She stared at it suspiciously. Something about the scent was off. It was too sweet, almost like syrup. She pretended to take a sip, then set it on the table. "Thank you," she said softly. The two officers exchanged a look. Then the one who gave her the tea said, "I'll go check on the others." "Others?" Mary asked quickly. But he had already walked away down the hall. The remaining officer sat across from her, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on her. "Mrs. Walker," he said quietly, "you know things you shouldn't. Your son's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the result of something much bigger. And people like us, we have to control that kind of information." Mary's voice trembled. "Control it? You killed him." He leaned back and smiled faintly. "We didn't kill him. He chose the wrong side." She stared at him in shock. "He was trying to expose you. He told me everything." The man's eyes darkened. "Then he told you lies. Do you know what happens when someone betrays the circle?" Mary said nothing. The man stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain slightly aside. "Your son was brilliant. Too brilliant. He found things he wasn't supposed to. But instead of staying quiet, he thought he could save the world. Foolish boy. He should have understood, the circle isn't evil, Mrs. Walker. We're necessary." She shook her head. "You're monsters." He chuckled softly. "People always say that when they don't understand power." Mary looked toward the hallway, her mind racing. She needed to get out. Every part of her body screamed for her to run. But how? The door was locked, and she didn't know what waited outside. Then suddenly, a faint sound came from the back of the house, a dull thud, like something falling. The officer turned sharply. "Stay here," he ordered, walking toward the sound. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, Mary stood up. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to move quietly toward the hallway. She passed two closed doors before finding one slightly open. Inside was a small office with a desk covered in papers and computer screens. She slipped inside and closed the door softly. On the desk lay several files labeled with symbols, circles with lines through them. One file was open, showing a picture that made her heart stop. It was Daniel, her son. His photo had red marks and notes scribbled all around it. She leaned closer, reading the words. Subject 47, terminated. Memory core recovered. Her eyes filled with tears. "Memory core?" she whispered. Then she noticed a small USB drive plugged into the computer. Without thinking, she pulled it out and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't know what was on it, but it had to be important. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mary froze. The doorknob turned slowly. She ducked behind the desk just as the door opened. The officer stepped in, looking around. "Mary?" His voice was calm, but his tone carried suspicion. "Come out. Don't make this harder." Mary covered her mouth to stay silent. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared he'd hear it. He took a few steps inside, his shoes clicking softly on the floor. He moved toward the window, scanning the room. For a second, he turned his back. Mary saw her chance. She crawled out from under the desk, grabbed a metal lamp, and swung it with all her strength. The lamp hit his shoulder. He shouted in pain, stumbling forward. Before he could turn, she bolted out the door and ran down the hall. "Stop!" he yelled behind her. She didn't look back. She sprinted to the front door, yanking the handle, locked. Desperately, she grabbed a chair and smashed the nearest window. Glass shattered everywhere. She climbed through, cutting her arm slightly on the shards, but she didn't care. Outside, the forest wind hit her face. She ran. Branches whipped against her as she stumbled through the trees. She could hear shouting behind her, footsteps following, but she didn't stop. The forest floor was uneven, full of roots and rocks, but fear gave her strength. After what felt like forever, she reached a small clearing where the sunlight finally broke through. She stopped to catch her breath, clutching the USB in her pocket. Her arms stung from the glass cuts, but she barely felt it. Then she heard it, the sound of an engine in the distance. A car. She turned and saw headlights approaching slowly through the trees. Her first thought was that it might be them, but something felt different. The car was smaller, older, a dusty silver sedan. It stopped a few meters away, and the driver stepped out. Mary froze. It was Harris. He looked rough, dirt on his clothes, a small cut on his forehead, but he was alive. "Harris," she whispered, barely believing her eyes. He nodded, breathing heavily. "Get in. We don't have much time." She ran to the car and climbed in. As soon as the door shut, Harris hit the gas. The car sped down the dirt road, bumping hard over roots and rocks. Mary turned to him, tears in her eyes. "They said you were gone. They said you were dead." He smirked weakly. "They tried. But I don't die that easy." "How did you find me?" "I tracked the GPS from the fake squad car. I knew they'd take you to one of their safe houses. I just didn't expect you to make it this far on your own." Mary held up the USB drive. "I found this in their office. It has Daniel's name on it." Harris's expression changed. "Then that's what they were after all along." "What's on it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Everything your son discovered before he died. Names, transactions, locations. Enough to destroy the circle forever." Mary felt a mix of hope and fear. "Then we have to use it." He nodded. "We will. But first, we have to survive." Behind them, a dark SUV appeared on the road, speeding toward them. "They're coming," Harris said, gripping the wheel tighter. The chase began. The car flew over the rough forest path, dust rising behind them. Bullets shattered the air as the SUV's windows flashed. Mary ducked instinctively. "Hold on!" Harris shouted, turning sharply onto a narrow bridge crossing a river. The tires screeched as the SUV tried to follow. Halfway across, a bullet hit the car's rear tire. The car swerved violently. Mary screamed as Harris fought to keep control. The vehicle slammed against the railing, sparks flying. Then, another shot. The windshield cracked. Harris jerked the wheel. The car broke through the railing and plunged into the river below. Cold water exploded through the windows. The world went dark. Mary's lungs burned as she tried to swim, but her seatbelt was stuck. She reached for Harris, but he was motionless. She yanked the belt until it snapped, then pushed her way out through the shattered window. When she surfaced, gasping for air, the car was already sinking. She grabbed onto a floating branch and looked around, no sign of the SUV. She was alone again. The forest was silent except for the river's steady rush. She clutched the USB to her chest, coughing and trembling. Her son's secret. Harris's sacrifice. Everything was in that small piece of metal. And now, she had to finish it. As she dragged herself onto the muddy riverbank, one thought echoed in her mind: she couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not the police. Not even the system. Only herself. She looked up at the darkening sky, whispering through her trembling lips, "I'll finish what you started, Daniel." Then she stood, soaked and shivering, and disappeared into the forest shadows, unaware that someone else was already watching her from behind the trees. The forest was dark and endless. Every direction looked the same: tall trees, tangled roots, and the faint mist of early dawn. Mary's clothes were soaked, her hair clinging to her face, but she kept walking. Each step was heavy, her legs trembling with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. She had one thing left to do. One promise to keep, to her son. The USB drive hung from a string around her neck, hidden beneath her wet shirt. It felt like a heartbeat, pulsing against her chest. That small piece of metal carried everything Daniel had died for. And now, it was all she had left of him. She stumbled over a fallen branch and caught herself on a tree. Her fingers were numb from the cold. The forest had gone silent again, no birds, no wind, just the distant sound of water flowing somewhere far behind her. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "Hold on, Mary. Just hold on." Then, she saw it, through the trees ahead, a faint light flickering like a candle. It was small but real. Hope sparked in her chest. Maybe there was help nearby. Maybe she could finally get out of these woods. She followed the light, pushing through the branches until she reached a small wooden cabin, half hidden among the trees. Smoke rose weakly from its chimney. The place looked old but lived in. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer and knocked softly on the door. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open, and an elderly man appeared. He had kind eyes and a gray beard, wearing a thick flannel shirt. "Ma'am," he said, surprised. "You're hurt. Come inside." Mary hesitated, but something about his voice felt genuine. She stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately. The fire in the stone fireplace filled the cabin with soft orange light. "Sit down," the man said gently, guiding her to a chair. "What happened to you?" Mary looked around quickly, still nervous. I was in an accident. I need to contact someone. Do you have a phone?" He nodded. "It's on the shelf near the window. But we don't have good signal here." She got up and grabbed the phone. No signal. She sighed, her hands shaking. "Please, I need to reach someone. It's urgent." The man frowned thoughtfully. "There's an old radio in the back room. Sometimes it can reach the next town. Maybe that could help." Mary's eyes brightened. "Please, show me." He led her to a small room filled with old equipment, dusty shelves, books, and a large black radio on a table. The radio hummed faintly when he turned it on. "It might take a minute to find the right frequency," he said. Mary nodded, staring at the dials. Her reflection in the metal surface looked pale and hollow, like she hadn't slept in days. As the man adjusted the knobs, static filled the room. Then a faint voice came through, broken, distant. "Search ongoing, 2 missing, possibly armed." Mary froze. The man looked up at her. "Sounds like police chatter." Her throat tightened. "Can you make it clearer?" He turned the knob again. "Female, mid-50s, last seen near the river bridge. The circle's operation may still be active." Mary's heart dropped. They were still looking for her. And they knew the circle was nearby. The man noticed her expression. "You're running from them, aren't you?" She looked at him sharply. "How do you know about them?" He smiled faintly. "Because I used to be one of them." Mary took a step back. "What?" The man sighed and sat down slowly. "A long time ago. Before your son got involved. I worked for them, the Circle. I thought I was doing good, protecting order. But then I saw what they really did to people who tried to tell the truth. That's when I ran." Mary's voice trembled. "You knew my son?" He nodded. "Daniel Walker. He came to me once. He said he had evidence, something that could destroy the Circle forever. I told him it was too dangerous, but he wouldn't listen. He said he couldn't live knowing the truth and doing nothing." Tears filled Mary's eyes. "He was brave, and they killed him for it." The old man looked down sadly. "They said he died in an accident, but I knew better. I saw the reports before I left. They wanted his data, whatever was on that memory drive. Mary touched the USB around her neck. It's here. Everything he died for. The man's eyes widened. You have it? She nodded. I need to get it to someone who can expose them. The news, the police, someone. He hesitated, then shook his head. The circle has people everywhere. If you give that drive to the wrong hands, it'll disappear, and so will you. Mary clenched her fists. Then tell me what to do. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, there's one person who can help. A journalist, Claire Henson. Your son trusted her. She's been trying to expose the circle for years. I can give you her location. Mary felt a spark of hope again. Then help me get there. The man smiled softly. Rest for a while. I'll get the truck ready. He stood and walked outside. Mary sat by the fire, staring into the flames. For the first time in days, she felt warmth that wasn't fear. She thought of Daniel, his laugh, his eyes, his courage. She whispered, I'm almost there, my son. I'll finish what you started. But peace never lasted long for her anymore. From outside came a faint noise, the crunch of boots on gravel. Then another. Mary stood up instantly, her heart racing. She went to the window and peeked outside. The old man was standing near the truck, frozen. Red dots of laser sights danced across his chest. A voice shouted from the trees, hands up. Don't move. Mary gasped. They had found her. The man turned slowly toward the sound. Mary, he called, his voice urgent. Run! Gunfire erupted. The window shattered, and Mary ducked as glass rained over her. The man fell to the ground outside. She grabbed the USB and sprinted toward the back door. Bullets tore through the walls. She kicked the door open and ran into the woods again. Her breath came in short, painful bursts as she stumbled through the darkness. Behind her, flashlights cut through the trees, the circle's men were chasing her. She ran until her lungs screamed for air. Then, through the branches ahead, she saw something, the faint lights of a small gas station by the highway. Salvation. She burst out of the woods, covered in mud and blood, and ran toward the lights. A car was parked near the pumps. Inside sat a woman with a laptop open on the dashboard. Mary banged on the window. Help me, please. The woman looked up, startled. Who are you? Mary gasped for breath. Claire Henson. You're Claire Henson, right? The woman blinked in shock. How do you know my name? Mary pulled the USB from her neck. Because my son trusted you. Daniel Walker. Claire's eyes widened. Daniel? My God. I thought he was dead. Mary shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He is. But this has everything. The circle. Their leaders. Their crimes. Take it. Finish his work. Claire reached out, taking the USB with trembling hands. You did it. You actually found it. But before they could say more, headlights flashed behind them. A black SUV screeched into the lot. Mary turned. They're here. Claire grabbed her arm. Get in the car. They jumped in. Claire started the engine and sped onto the highway as gunshots echoed behind them. The tires screeched, the car swerved, but they kept going. For miles, no one spoke. The only sound was the engine and Mary's shaky breathing. Finally, Claire glanced at her. We'll be safe once we reach the next town. I have people waiting. We'll get this data out to the world. Mary nodded weakly. Promise me my son didn't die for nothing. Claire looked at her with tears in her eyes. I promise. Hours later, as dawn broke again, the story of the circle hit every major news outlet. Hidden crimes, secret names, and government links were exposed. Arrests began within hours. The world finally knew what Daniel Walker had died for. Mary watched it all from a small motel room, her hands shaking as she saw her son's name on the screen. The headline read, "Whistleblower's Secret Files Expose Hidden Organization, The Circle Falls." Tears ran down her face. She smiled faintly through them and whispered, "You did it, Daniel. You really did." Outside, the sun rose over the trees, warm and bright. For the first time in a long time, Mary felt peace. But as she turned off the TV and looked out the window, she noticed something. Across the street, a man in a dark suit stood beside a car, watching her. When she looked directly at him, he smiled, and slowly lifted his hand to show a small silver ring with a line through it. Mary's breath caught in her throat. The circle had fallen, but maybe not all of it. She stepped back from the window, clutching her necklace. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. But for now, she had one. For now, her son could finally rest. She whispered softly, "Rest now, Daniel." Mom kept her promise. And with that, she sat by the window, watching the morning light fill the room, a mother who had faced darkness and found her way back to hope. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story I share carries a piece of emotion, mystery, and truth. Your support helps me bring more of them to life. Thank you for listening.